I am going to start talking about something called World War IV. Will you put the paper plate football away before it even becomes a thing, Ian? Fix it. I believe that over the next couple days, you will be presented information which is really the core of this class. World War IV is the core of this class. And you might be thinking, World War IV, is he nuts? Because where was this World War III? And that is, this is intentional. I did not make a mistake. It's going off of a premise of what is a world war. And I've got certain characteristics here. So just follow me here that what we're trying to do is explain a conflict of ideas. That's what a world war is. A war between two nations is not a world war. They might be fighting over land. What makes a war a world war is there's an ism trying to be pushed, an ism, okay? So, for example, let's go back to World War I. You studied it in your American history class, or you're currently doing it now, or whatever. World War I was a battle over empiricism, empires, right? The British Empire was fighting against the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was fighting against the German Empire, was fighting against the Ottoman Empire. They were fighting over parts of Africa. They were fighting over the Middle East. They were fighting over Asia. The European nations who started the age of empires by sailing west over the Atlantic and then claiming lands as their own, starting this attempt to conquer parts of the world, duked it out in World War I over my version of empire versus your version of empire. Okay, World War I, Battle of Empires. World War II was a battle over another type of ism, fascism versus communism versus democracyism. That's a stretch. Okay, but, right, the Nazi view, world wars are my view of the way the world should be versus your view of the way the world should be. During World War I, the British said, our view of the way the world should be is us. And the Austro-Hungarians said, nein! And the Ottomans said, no. And okay, World War II is the German view of the way the world should be, which would be white people. Hooray, white people. They called them Aryans. Versus the, by the way, the Soviets did not fit that term. Soviets, the Russians are not white people. The Soviets were Slavs, and they did not fit. And so the Germans tried to wipe out the Russians, right? And our view of the way the world should be would be, it doesn't matter what race or color you are, who cares, as long as people are free, right? Democracyism. Fine. All right, I think we're all familiar with World War I and World War II. Apparently there was a World War III? Yes! There was a World War III, we call it the Cold War. Again, what's the ism? Well, communism versus our view of the way the world should be, capitalism. Our view was capitalism. The Soviet view was communism. It's a battle over the way the world should be. Well, that leads to, well, okay, what's World War IV? World War IV is our view of the way the world should be, which would be freedom. Doesn't matter what race you are, doesn't matter what religion you are, living together versus another group and their view of the way the world should be, and that would be radicalism, radical fundamentalism. Okay, no more nations. We're going to get into this, but the groups that the U.S. is confronting in this current conflict do not believe in nations. The U.S. believes in nations. We think that's the logical way to organize Earth. Nations, countries. But the groups we're fighting do not believe in nations or countries. They believe in radical religious rule. Sheila as an example. Okay. Any questions on the slide? Go ahead. Yeah, fine. Hey, we're not watching this cartoon, so relax. I am showing you in the previous world wars, what are some common characteristics that would say, yep, that's a definite identifier of a way a war is fought. So, for example, in previous wars, country 1 raises an army, country 2 raises an army, our army fights your army. Okay? Is anyone out there like, what? Army?
What's that?
Take that back.
No, you take that back.
Characteristic number 2 is the attacking of the enemy's army or military bases. Here's our military base. The Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. There's the Japanese military base. Our military attacks their military base. Our military attacks your military. Your military attacks our military with these things called weapons. You could look at a weapon and say, that is a weapon of war. You're looking at a tank. You're looking at a submarine. You're looking at a jet fighter. You can look at it and say, that is for a military. That is a military use. You're looking at the explosion of the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor.
Whoa, that's a big explosion.
Characteristic number 3, as we're going here, is the use of conventional weapons. Conventional weapons. Guns, helicopters, tanks, fighter jets, aircraft carriers, right? Think of those of you that play video games and you're arming yourself to the teeth, right? You don't necessarily arm yourself with a 747. That's who does that? Well, by the way, that's exactly what will happen in World War IV. I am identifying for you typical identifiers of typical wars before World War IV. Ian, will you sit here? Are you 4?
No.
Look.
On the other table.
You all right?
Yeah. How?
Why aren't you melting like the scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark? Okay. Identifier number 5. Again, number 4. Again, what we're doing here is we're saying what is typical of wars until World War IV, and that is the attacking of cities with weapons. You happen to be looking at Hiroshima on day 2. Okay, not a whole lot left. Very typical. You attack enemy targets, including civilian cities, civilian targets. That is very typical. You lay siege to a city. I mean, this goes back to thousands of years. Where's the enemy? Where's the enemy's civilian population? Kill them. Kill the babies. Kill the old women.
Yeah, I have a
Go ahead.
question. So, all right, this might be a bit off topic, but why did we bomb cities and not like a government building?
Okay, so let's just think about your question. He asked, why attack the cities? Why not attack a government building? So in your world, are government buildings off by themselves?
Yeah.
No, but like,
Aren't they located in cities?
what was the purpose of blowing up 2 major cities?
Oh, you're asking why we bombed the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah. Why
That's funny you asked. It's just that happens to be where I am in another class. The justification is the Japanese would not have surrendered otherwise. That they had a mentality of no surrender. So we had to basically scare the snot out of them so they finally would surrender. Otherwise, they wouldn't have. Is the justification. There are others that say we were not justified. Okay, let's keep going here. The identification of easily identifiable targets, right? Just picture the night before the attack, they lay out the map and they say, all right, where are the targets? Where are the steel mills? Where are the military installations? Where's the headquarters? Precision bombing. You mark it on a map and then you say, all right, pilots, see the targets? All right, go at it. Hit the military targets. Just think about this. What I'm teasing here is I'm going to be showing you characteristics of the current war we're in where none of these are true. Not one. That the enemy doesn't wear uniforms. That we are not attacking a country versus country. It's country versus group. that conventional weapons aren't used. Planes are used. Civilian aircraft are used. That we don't bomb cities with weaponry that was designed for that purpose. That is no longer the case. That the targets aren't easily identifiable. When you lay out a map of Al-Qaeda-istan and you say, all right, where are the major targets of Al-Qaeda-istan? The first thing someone's going to say is, sir, there is no Al-Qaeda-istan. Oh, the second thing is, what valuable targets? They live in caves. These people live in caves, right? They don't have structures that they've spent millions of dollars building that we can then tear down. They live in caves. And so it's hard to identify the targets. And then the last thing that I've identified, typical of conflicts that we've been in before, is there are rules. There are rules that both sides observe. If side A violates the rules, side B can say, hey, you just violated the rules. Part of the argument that the U.S. was justified in attacking Hiroshima and Nagasaki was that they accused the Japanese of violating the rules of war, that the Japanese were guilty of some horrific things, not necessarily against the U.S., but against China. They violated rules, right? How many of you are aware that during World War I, that the Germans violated the rules by using mustard gas? Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Mustard gas, which is actually the second most common gas used. It was actually chlorine was the main gas used by the Germans, by the way, and the French. They both used it. It's just that the Germans lost. So the Allies could say, hey, you broke the rules. And the Germans could say, but so did you not. We won. You lost. Shut it. In our current conflict, do you think, as the terrorists are about to saw off the head of some civilian they captured, Bill opens the door and says, Jimmy, wait! Don't you know that sawing off heads is illegal? And Jimmy's like, whoo, that was close. Sorry, Bill. I didn't know. I thought this was legit. All right, let's just lock you up. What? Can you imagine? Next year's football game, right? We're about to play New Richmond. And do we know this thing called football? All right, New Richmond has a wide receiver in the end zone during the entire play, right? Before the ball is hiked, they already have a receiver in the end zone. So Somerset's like, well, we don't have to worry about this guy. Obviously, the ref will throw the flag, right? So New Richmond hikes the ball, throws it to him, touchdown, right? And Larson's losing his mind, and he's like, what are you talking? That's my Mark Larson impersonation right there. What are you talking about, right? Okay, and they broke the rules, and the ref says, what are you talking about? New Richmond doesn't have to play by the rules. You do, but they don't, right? Will Somerset win that game? Probably not. It's not fair that one side obeys the rules and the other side doesn't. That's what's going on. The U.S. is confronting an enemy that doesn't care about the rules because those rules were signed by these things called nations. We are not fighting a nation. We are fighting a group that does not recognize the rules. So how can they be bound by rules that they do not observe as legit? Make sense? Let's keep going. So it's just a reminder here, what I'm introducing to you is that we are right now in this thing called World War IV, which means that World War III ended. Okay, well, how'd that happen? Okay, end of the Cold War, right? We are looking at this thing called Afghanistan. The Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan, leaving whatever situation was there to sort of rekindle, to fester like a giant pimple, right? And it's going to pop. It's going to be gross and yucky and yet oddly fascinating. All these colors represent tribes that live in Afghanistan. Tribes are groups of people that identify with their own rather than the nation, right? If you were to land here and say, how do you identify yourself? I mean, if someone were to land here and say, what do you consider yourself? I think most of us would say, we're Americans, right? But these people say, I'm from the Pushtun tribe. I'm from the Lakshar tribe. They do not identify themselves as Afghan. Afghanistan is a nation. Many people don't see it as a nation. They see it as where their tribe lives. That's what the U.S. is confronting. The U.S. is confronting a group of people that do not look at the world map and say, that's how the world should be, a map of nations. They reject it. No, that's not how the world should be. That's how you people imposed your will on the way the world should be. We don't see it that way. We see it this way. Okay? The withdrawal of Soviet troops leads to war in Afghanistan. The withdrawal of the end of the Cold War leads to civil war in Yugoslavia. We already looked at that. Between what? Between tribes. I am telling you that World War IV involves this thing called, big word, tribalism. Tribalism. Loyalty to your tribe rather than the nation itself. Within Russia itself, as an example, there's this group called Chechnya. The Chechens live in Russia, but they don't see themselves as Russian. They see themselves as Chechnyan. Chechnya is not a nation. They are a tribe inside Russia, but they want to be their own people, and so they see themselves as Chechnyan, not Russian. Okay? Number one and number two, and then I'm going to move on. Right? With the end of the Cold War, there is no more Soviet military presence. There is no more American military presence to prevent civil war, civil war, civil war. Not in wars between nations, wars between tribes inside these things that we call nations, but they don't call them nations. Okay? And then number two, the very groups that we used to support during the Cold War, because they were enemies of the Soviet Union, would now become American enemies. Let's go to Afghanistan. Afghanistan during the Cold War was occupied by the Soviet Union. We didn't like the Soviet Union. Any of you have ever heard this term before? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. We didn't like the Soviets. This group didn't like the Soviets. We didn't like the Soviets. They didn't like the Soviets. So we liked them. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So we helped this group. This group was called the Mujahideen. They were in Afghanistan and they didn't like the Soviets. They were in Afghanistan. They didn't like the Soviets. We didn't like the Soviets. So we liked them. And so we gave them money, weapons, and training. They win. Soviets withdraw. That group, the Mujahideen, 10 years later, changed their name to Al-Qaeda. Same group. The very group that we supported during the Cold War became the new American enemy. Because what we never asked them, we knew what they didn't believe in. This is important. Listen, we knew what they didn't believe in, communism. But we never asked them what they believe in. We know they don't like communism. We know they don't like Soviet military occupation. But we never said, by the way, if you win, what are you all about? We wouldn't have liked the answer. Because they would have said, oh, what do we like? We like tribalism. We didn't like that answer. We never asked it. We just said, Soviets are the worst thing. They don't like the Soviets either. Let's help them. And so the groups formerly supported by the CIA to fight the Soviets are now using that same weaponry, that same training to fight the one entity that can prevent their view of the way the world should be. Who is the only entity that can prevent this? The U.S. The U.S. is the only entity in their minds that can prevent this tribalism, the ending of Afghanistan as a nation, the ending of Iraq as a nation, the ending of nation. Nation is an invention. Did you know that? Up there, top 10. Mine, Mount Rushmore, greatest invention ever. Number one would be sliced bread. Number two, nations. Number three, time. That's pretty cool. Time is an invention. And people invented time. Okay, let's keep going here a little more, and then I'm going to end it. Last slide. What do they want? They being the new American adversary of this thing called World War IV. What are their goals? Why? This, my friends, might be the most important slide in this class all semester. If anyone ever asks you, why did they do 9/11? Why'd that happen? You can say, this is why. What do they want? What do these groups want? Okay, number one, maybe the most important. Hey, U.S., get out of the Middle East. Stay there in America. We got it here. Stop imposing your view of the way the world should be in the Middle East. Right? The U.S. looks at the Middle East and sees this thing called Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a nation. And the U.S. says, nations are good. We want to maintain nations. We're going to protect this thing called Saudi Arabia. And so the Americans put soldiers in Saudi Arabia. Remember, the United States put 500,000 soldiers in Saudi Arabia in 1990? Okay. These people want the U.S. out. This bar graph, I'll look at this and then I'll look at this. This bar graph represents Americans in the Middle East. You'll notice 1990, a lot of American military personnel in the Middle East. And then it kind of goes back down. And now, today it's about that many. Get out. We don't want you here. Go back to where you can enforce your view of the way the world should be in America. Fine, be a nation. We don't want you here, though. Get out. Okay. Goal number 2, stop supporting this thing called Israel. Israel is a nation. Israel is a nation. Again, they don't believe in nations. Anyone know how Israel was formed? After what? Very good. Israel, the nation, was formed after World War II. What entity created Israel?
United Nations.
Very good. The United Nations, Mr. Barry. The United Nations. United Nations created Israel. Let's just understand what happened. Okay? Let's travel over here to Nazi Germany. The Nazis wiped out the Jews, right? Some left, but not a whole lot. There were some left. And so the United Nations said, hey, Jews that survived the Holocaust, why don't you move over here to a nation called Israel? The problem was that there were people that lived here already. And they said, why are you taking our land and giving it to the people that were killed over there? Let's say tomorrow morning, I think I used this already, but I'm going to use it again. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., you get a knock at the door. And there's this guy at the door, and he says, I'm really hungry. Can I have some food? And you say, sure, you can have some food. So you take him and walk to your neighbor's house, break into his kitchen, and give him all the food he wants. And he looks at you and says, thanks. And then you walk, and by the way, as you're walking out the door, your neighbor finally wakes up because of all the noise. And what'd you just do? Oh, I gave him a bunch of your food because he was hungry. Now, does your neighbor say, oh, okay. Or does your neighbor say, why didn't you give him your food? These people that lived over here said to the United Nations, why did you take our land and give it to the Jews? Why didn't you give them Germany? Why don't you take land from Germany, the people that wiped out the Jews? Why didn't you give the Jews this land? Or give them New Jersey? Nobody likes New Jersey. Give them New Jersey. Why did you take our land? So these people view Israel as an illegal entity. It should not exist. And yet it does. Do you know why? Who's the biggest backer of Israel? US. Right? And they don't like it. The Arabs do not like the existence of Israel, which they believe was created illegally. And it only exists because the US is the big backer, and they don't like it. Question.
What was the reason they took back
The Holy Land.
It is considered by the Jewish people to be land that Yahweh intended for the Jewish people. It's the original land of the Jews. 3,000 years ago, the invading Babylonians and Egyptians took the Jewish land, and then said, all right, get out of here, Jews. Some moved to Germany, and some moved to France, and some moved to the US. So they consider it to be their original land, and that's why they wanted it there. Okay, and then number 3, and I would say this is the most important one of all, and then I'm done talking. And that is an end to American culture. An end to American culture. Now, you're sitting there thinking, American culture? There is no such thing. We're Americans. We have no culture. But you do. You do have a culture. American culture. And it's exemplified by some things that I have on the screen right now. McDonald's is an example of American culture. Big fan.
Yeah, I am.
Movies with sex and violence in it are examples of American culture. There's a common theme here. Do you recognize it yet? Alcohol is an example of American culture. All of these cigarettes, maybe someday soon, recreational use of marijuana, they all represent the same thing, and that is this: individual choice. You have the right in America to go to McDonald's every single day, 3 times a day, and get fat.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You have the right to rent one movie after another that's rated, I don't even know how they rate things these days, PG-13, rated R, whatever. Go ahead. And those movies involve violence and sex. And you are free to make the decision on your own to watch those movies. You can consume the last bit of nectar known as whiskey, and with the very last drop of that nectar of the gods, you're already popping open the next bottle. As long as you're old enough, go ahead. But there are other parts of the world where they look at this and say, we can't trust people to make their own decisions. People are morons. We will make the decision. What I'm talking about is we, the people who want the U.S. out of the Middle East, who want an end to this thing called Israel, and we want an end to American cultural influence. When we control land, we will make the decision about what people can eat, about what people can watch, about what people can do with their own bodies, about what God they will worship. We will make that decision for them. Do you understand that this is the opposite of the American view of the way the world should be? The people, this is important, the people that the U.S. are confronting have an anti-American agenda, but now you are old enough to understand what that is supposed to mean. America means the belief in this thing called nations. That you look at Earth, organize it by nation, that makes sense. But these people say that, no, it doesn't. That's not the way the world should be. We reject it. That's what anti-American means. What the United States means is an international order that can make decisions through the UN that the world is bound by. But these people say, I don't recognize the United Nations. I never voted for it. I never said that that could be created. I reject it. And these people reject individual freedom. The freedom to eat what you want, the freedom to watch what you want, the freedom to drink what you want, the freedom to gamble, the freedom to be a moron. The freedom to be a moron. And they say when we're in control, we will make the decisions on behalf of the people that live under our control. People cannot make their own decisions. That's anti-American. It's the opposite of what you and I think the way the world should be. I think most of us agree that I should not have the right to tell you what to do. Right? No, you're going to be a doctor, damn it. No, you're going to decide what you want to be and where you want to live and whether or not you want to get in shape or eat candy every single day and gamble and drink. Go ahead. But in these people's minds, that is a dereliction of responsibility and leadership. And America is a culturally devoid nation. A nation that allows this stuff is a nation that should end. Which is an interesting perspective. Okay, questions?
So what does the plane have to do?
American culture overseas is seen in McDonald's, in American movies, in American products, and American soldiers. This is a military plane.
Oh, okay.
Think about this. When you're in another country, when you look at Exhibit A, what makes you think that's American? There are McDonald's in every country, every civilized country. People look at McDonald's and say, that's American. Most movies in the world are American-made movies. Individual decisions to consume alcohol or smoke cigarettes or whatever. That is freedom, man. Rock and roll. That's American. It's freedom. It's individual choice. But other groups don't see it that way. That's not freedom. Think about this. Magazines, girly magazines. In our country, it's not like everybody celebrates it. And in fact, a lot of Americans oppose it. But it's not illegal. I know this is weird, but pornography is not illegal. Child pornography, illegal. Should be. But pornography is not illegal. That doesn't mean everyone agrees with it, but it's legal and maybe immoral, but our government does not make it illegal because our government says whether you think you should or shouldn't, can or can't, it's not our job to tell you can or can't. That's your job as a parent, as a religious organization. But we're not going to tell you to do that. But in other parts of the world, that's exactly what the government does. So you're not gonna do that smut in our nation. You're not gonna have these things in our nation. You're not gonna have those things in our nation. You're gonna have these things in our nation. This is why 9/11 occurred. Mostly this one. Okay. As an example. The encroaching of American culture into parts of the world where they don't want it. Okay. Any questions? Now, there are about 10 minutes left, and you might think, I'm going to do nothing. This is America. I just got telling you can be a moron, but now I'm going to rescind that and say, no, you, okay. There is article summary number 2, which is due this coming Friday. For many of you, how about doing article summary number 1? That's crazy. Plus Persian Gulf Wars test, plus. There are the computers. You've got 10 minutes. Get something done. All right? I'm done. I will.
It's all by myself.